Right, well, here's something a bit different. I thought I would do a bit of a how to play Warhammer Fantasy based on the fact that 3 people there last week asked me how to play, and at least one of them wasn't being sarcastic. So I thought, well, why not do a couple of videos on how you actually play the game? Because I talk about it a lot, but it's sort of assumed that people know what I'm talking about when I'm referring to the rules. But since it's a dead game from 10 years ago, perhaps that's not the case. I'm not sure what the audience for this is, because most people who listen to my rambling podcasts already know the rules, but hopefully there'll be a core of people who are really interested in playing a game that was discontinued 10 years ago. So if you are, I hope this helps. So what is Warhammer Fantasy Battle? Well, it's a 2-player tabletop war game. 2 players agree a points limit to play to, usually something like 2,000, 2,500 points. You build an army, spending those points, and then you fight, usually over 6 turns. The turns are broken up into movement, magic, shooting, and combat. And it's one player takes all of those turns, all those phases, then hands over to the next player who gets his turn, and so on and so forth until all 6 turns are gone. At the end of the game, you total up how much damage you've done, and then the usual way is if you win by 100 victory points, you're considered to have won the game. Tournaments are slightly different, but that's how it is in the rule book. This is the 8th edition rules, which are the ones I like. It's a bit more complicated, arguably. It's got quite a lot of rules, as you can see. And some rules in it, like steadfast and stuff, which we'll come on to. A bit controversial. This is the version I like. 6th and 4th were more cavalry and hero based. This one's more big infantry blocks, which is why it appeals to me. So what do you need to play Warhammer Fantasy? Well, you need this, the rule book. It's got loads and loads and loads of rules in it. It's also got the scenarios that you can play, which I'll come on to it a bit later, and the magic in as well. So you need that. You will need an army book for the army you're playing, the High Elf book. This contains the army roster, special rules, magic things for your particular army. You need the rules for that. You also need loads and loads of dice. So Fantasy uses a lot of D6s, 6-sided dice. Use these to roll D3s and all sorts. But most of the dice rolling will be using that. There's also these, the scatter dice and the artillery dice. This is often to do with war machines, and sometimes spell casting determines whether you're accurate with that or not. There are templates. So there's the small round template, big round template, and the flamer template. Again, this is mostly artillery and spells. More of that in a bit. You will need models to represent your army on the field. Sea Helm, BSB. So you need them to represent the actual army itself. You'll need someone to play. It's usually a 6x4 table, unless you're playing an exceptionally large game. You will need a tape measure. And you'll need someone to play. And that's about it. So I thought I'd start out with some basic concepts of the game, some of the basic mechanics of it. I'll then probably do an episode on each of the phases, and I'll throw in a few episodes on basic other concepts like units and things like that, hitting and wounding, things like that. And we'll just see how it goes. So a few basic concepts of the game is, well, for starters, every model has a profile. So this is a Sea Helm. But they all have profiles which are made up of movement. It tells you how far the model can move. Weapon skill tells you how skillful it is in combat. Higher the weapon skill, the better they are at fighting. Ballista skill is the same for shooting. It's how accurate they are, how easy it is to hit. Strength, how strong the model is. Toughness, how difficult it is to wound it. Wounds, how much damage it can take. Initiative is how fast it is in combat. And leadership is how good it is at staying put and not breaking at the critical moment. All these characteristics, you can have a test on them. Well, I think most of them you can anyway. To do a characteristic test, the most common one is a leadership test. So things happen in the game where you call on to take a leadership test. If you ever called on to take a characteristic test, you've got to roll that number or lower. So leadership 7 is the average. So you call on to take a leadership test. It's 2 dice, roll under a 7. So that's a 6, so that's a pass. A lot of spells, things do characteristics test, which is a strength test. Strength test for a model. That's, well, if his average strength is 3, that's a fail. So you failed the characteristic test there. Measuring. This can be done at any time. It's all done in inches. Done at any time. Pre-measuring is allowed. Distance are measured from closest point to closest point between units. So let's have a look. Sea helm there, and the eagle there. Focusing very well. The measuring's always closest point to closest point. So you got the sea helm there and the eagle there. It's not there, not from that point to that point. It's from that point to that point. So he will be within 4 inches because that bit of the base is 4 inches, well, just under 4 inches away from that guy's base. So it's always closest to closest. That comes in relevant for charges and things like that, which I'll get onto in the movement phase episode. The templates from before, anything that's partially touched on the base by a template is considered to be hit by it. So it doesn't matter, that eagle is completely covered by it, or if it was just there, that still hits it the same way as if it landed on top of it. The templates have a hole in the middle. Usually a lot of rules for artillery and things that if you hit the model under the hole, it hits at a higher strength, but the profile of the weapon will tell you. But that's irrelevant. If it hits over the model's hit under the hole, it's usually worse for the model getting hit. Done scatter as well. Scatter dice. Usually it'd be things like artillery and spells. To scatter something, you put the template over what you're hoping to hit. Roll the scatter dice and the artillery dice. It's usually better to roll it right next to the model because it'll tell you which way it's going. That's going that way 8 inches, so you just move the template 8 inches that way, which is scattered off it. The scatter dice has 2 hits. It's a hit symbol. You roll a hit, you just ignore this unless it says that one, misfire. That misfire overrides a hit. Misfire usually, well, it means something's gone wrong. And there's charts you roll on depending on what it is you are doing, artillery or magic, to tell you what's actually gone wrong and how you're going to suffer for that. Yeah, that's it for scatter dice. Tells you where it goes off. Line of sight, the game uses true line of sight. Basically a model's eye view. If it's not immediately apparent what the model can see, you just got to get down to the model's eye line and see exactly what it can see as to whether it can see something, whether a thing it's trying to hit is in cover, or whether there's nothing in the way. I'll get onto that in probably the shooting episode. So to play a game, you'll need an army list, which is just, as it says, it's the list of every model that you're bringing to the points limit of the game that you're playing. So 1,000 points, you've got 1,000 points to spend on what miniatures you want to bring. There are some, well, there are rules about this. Most important one is you must have 25% of your points allowance spent on core. Core are supposed to be the most numerous troops in your army. For high elves, they're things like silver helms here, spearmen, archers. Yeah, they're not the elites, they're just the normal rank and file soldiers that most of the army is allegedly supposed to be made of. Not always necessarily the case. Along with core, there are special. So the sword masters there, they're a special choice. They're supposed to be the more elite units. You'll pay more for them per model usually, and you can only spend up to 50% of your points allowance on special troops. Beyond that, there is rare. So the eagle is a rare choice. This is things that are supposed to be very uncommon. For high elves, it's eagles, frost out phoenixes, which arguably aren't that uncommon. Bolt throwers. Every army's got their own selection of rare choices. You can only spend up to 25% of your points on rare. The leaders, so lords, which are your most powerful characters, you can only spend 25% of your points allowance on them. It was FAQ'd to during the end times to 50%, so some people play 50%. I usually just play it at 25% because I prefer it. Otherwise, it goes back to sort of hero hammer. Heroes again, lords and heroes. So an anointed's a lord. He's got access to more special equipment with a higher profile. Heroes are still quite powerful, but they're not as good as lords. Again, you can spend 25% of your points allowance on heroes, unless you're playing end times, which is 50%. That's basically it for the rules about list building. So I'll show you an example of a list using what I've got here. Just about 1,000 points. 1,000 points is a good starter. It's not going to get too complicated. It's not going to be too much involved, and you'll learn how the mechanics of the game work. So I will go through that. Okay, so here's a sample 1,000-point army list of high elves. There are some really good army list builders, like Battle Scribe, that'll do it all for you. But there's nothing wrong with pen and paper or just typing it out yourself. So that's the Lord choice, which is the Anointed of Assyrian. He'll be the Army General. The model with the highest leadership is always the Army General, and every army needs one, as well as the 25% core. So he is worth 210 points. So 1,000 points, so you can spend up to 250 points on Lords, so he's under that. So the hero will be the Northern Sea Helm. Yeah, it's the Sea Helm there. He is worth 100 points. So he's under the limit as well. So for core, we will have 9 silver helms. They come to 189 points. We'll also have, to make up our minimum core, we will have 10 spearmen. and they come to 90 points. I get it right. Can't spell apparently. So the core comes to 379 points. So we have hit the minimum core requirement. Get rid of them. So now we've paid the core tax. Get the special units in. So that's 18 Swordmasters. They come to 234 points. You can see the price has gone up for the special. And then we'll have an eagle for our rare choice. These are flat 50 points. So let's check the basic composition. Lords haven't gone over 25%. Heroes haven't gone over 25%. Core, that comes to more than 250 points. So it's 25% of 1,000 points. So yeah, that's above 250. So that's legal. Special, we haven't spent more than 500 points on them. And rare, we haven't spent more than 250 points on that. So the list in total comes to 973 points. So you probably could chuck in another spearman or a silver helm just to get it up to near 1,000, but doesn't matter, it's just a tester. So that's a legal army. Your opponent would do exactly the same thing, and then you'd have a fight. There's more about units and upgrades and full command and things like that. I'll do that in another episode. I'll do a episode on units, just because there's quite a bit to go into on units, what they can do and who can join them and how they all work. That'll do for an introductory episode. I'll try to put these out a bit more regularly, because I quite like the rules, especially 8th edition. But right, there we go. That'll do for a starter. I'll probably do units next, and then I'll start on the movement phase, which is probably the most important one. But until then, thanks very much.